What's up, Camps fam? Thanks for coming back to the channel. Today I'm actually going to be covering one of my epilepsy books. I have quite a few. And I'm actually going to randomly just pick one. Looks like I got a guide for professionals and caregivers. I want to say I'm a professional, but before I go any further, please always talk to your doctor before you make any decisions. I'm just speaking from experience and from all the facts and the things that I have. So let's dive right in. So the very first page actually just has some epilepsy facts, which I love. Epilepsy is a condition of the brain that is characterized by recurring or multiple seizures. I have heard that as soon as you have 2 or more seizures, you do have epilepsy. So keep that in mind, please. A person cannot catch epilepsy from someone else. So I have heard that before. It's kind of like a epilepsy myth, if you will, which is just crazy to think that, but you know, I have heard some crazy things that people think, and you know, America and just the world is a crazy place if you think about it, right? So know that myself and people with epilepsy, we're not contagious. You know, you can hang out with us, believe it or not. Epilepsy is more common than most people realize. In the general population, approximately 1 person in every 100 has epilepsy. So that's pretty crazy. I actually think that in the US it's even more common. In Canada it has different numbers, so if you want to look into it, you know, you can just jump on Google, but there's like a pretty broad number there. People of all ages and nationalities have epilepsy, so it doesn't matter where you are, where you're from, what age you are, you can have epilepsy, right? Epilepsy can begin at any age, although its onset is most often in childhood or in the later years of life. So, something to also keep in mind. The causes of epilepsy vary according to the age of the onset of epilepsy. In many epilepsy cases, no specific cause of epilepsy and seizures can be identified. Here are some of the cases: genetic, birth injury, like a lack of oxygen to the baby's brain during birth; developmental disorder, like a brain damage to the fetus during pregnancy, like, you know, hitting the belly, if you will; brain trauma from car accidents or a sports injury. So mine was actually from a car accident. If you don't know my story, I'll actually link it above here if you're on the mobile device, or I'll put it below in the description. I was in a car accident in 2017, and I suffered a traumatic brain injury, which led to me having post-traumatic epilepsy. So now I have seizures and epilepsy. An infection, a brain tumor, strokes, alcohol, drug abuse. Actually, there's been some people, famous people, who have passed away from a lot of drug overdoses, and it led to them having seizures, and then they died from having epilepsy. And then Alzheimer's disease as well. So some crazy things I actually didn't know. The brain is made up of billions of nerve cells and neurons that communicate through like chemical signals. And when there's a sudden, excessive like discharge that disrupts that, that's when a seizure happens. So the way it was described to me by my doctor is kind of like a thunder or lightning storm in your brain. And so, you know, your brain controls everything, so you just don't know what's going on, right? There are many types of seizures. For instance, a person having a seizure might stare blankly, jerk his or her arm uncontrollably, or feel a burning sensation, or have a convulsion. That's actually the ones I used to have. I feel like I do have a few different ones, but that last one is kind of what I would have the most, and I feel like that's the most commonly, like the known one that everyone knows, is where people start shaking, and that's, oh, someone's having a seizure, right? Not everyone knows that there's a lot of different types of seizures, right? The form of the seizure depends on where in the brain that activity is occurring. So think about that. People sometimes only experience one type of seizure. Others experience more than one type. I'm in that others category. I have more than one. Some people with epilepsy rarely have seizures, while others have numerous seizures in a day. So that's kind of crazy. On my TikTok, I actually have some people tell me, I've had a few seizures 18 years ago and never had one since. So that kind of falls into that first category. And then I've had a few people that say, I cannot stop having seizures for the life of me. And that falls into the second category there, right? Seizures can change with age. There may be a change in the duration, intensity, and frequency of the seizures as the person reaches the senior years. So as you get older, your seizures may change. In general, seizures are painless and naturally, and they're not dangerous to others. They are pretty dangerous to the person having the seizure though. So, and well over half of those with epilepsy, seizures can be well controlled with seizure medication. So, as long as you have your dosage right and you always take your medication, you can control it with seizure medication. Right here, this goes over seizure types. There are many types of seizures. The different types begin in different areas of the brain, and they are grouped into two categories, partial and generalized. If the sudden excessive activity occurs in one part of the brain, it's called a partial seizure. If the excessive activity involves the whole brain, the seizure is called a generalized seizure. Sometimes seizures begin as a partial and then they spread and become a generalized seizure. So I feel like just looking at these two, I actually have the second, the generalized seizure, because right here it actually explains it a little more in detail. A partialized seizure, the two most common kinds of partialized seizure are simple partial and complex partial. During a simple partial seizure, awareness remains intact. So you're actually still aware of what's going on. It's like you're just slightly impaired, I guess, right? A simple partial seizure usually begins suddenly and lasts seconds to minutes. It may involve symptoms that result in a person experiencing like a sensation, a feeling, something like an aura. An aura takes many different forms. For example, an aura might be like just like a little sight, a sound, a smell, sudden jerk in like your body, right? Dizziness, and like this is the one I would actually get, an overwhelming emotion. That's when I actually know that the bigger seizure was coming, and then if I was driving, I would actually pull over to the side. If I had VNS now, like I do, I would grab my magnet, I would swipe it, it would stop the big seizure from coming. An aura is a simple partial seizure that may occur alone or may progress to a complex partial seizure or a generalized seizure. So mine always progressed unless I swiped my magnet for my VNS therapy, and then I normally stop that general one from happening. During a complex partial seizure, a person experiences altered awareness and may appear dazed and confused, like a dream-like experience may occur. The seizure often begins with sensations, feelings, like the aura we just talked about. It's almost used like a warning. I always told people about my auras, like, hey, I actually had, you're actually aware of what's happening, which is really cool. And I would tell people if I was at work, if I was around family, I would actually tell people, hey, I'm about to have a seizure, and it would really help, right? This type of seizure usually lasts between 1 to 2 minutes, and it's often followed by the postictal period or confusion, for sure. A generalized seizure commonly takes 1 to 2 forms, absent or tonic clonic. An absent seizure results in a blank stare, usually lasting less than 10 seconds. The seizure starts and ends abruptly, and awareness is impaired during the seizure. Following the seizure, alertness is regained quickly. An individual may experience as many as several hundred absent seizures in a day. I did not know that. That's crazy. The tonic clonic, that's actually formerly called a grand mal seizure. Trying to get away from that, I guess. That usually lasts 1 to 3 minutes. The tonic phase is a seizure type typically involving a crying out or groan, a loss of awareness, and a fall. You pretty much like your muscles stiffen up and you just cannot move. So, people fall to the ground and then they start to, shake, right? It involves jerking and twitching of the muscles in all 4 limbs, and it typically involves the whole body. Thankfully, this has never happened to me, but it does happen. Urinary or bowel control may be lost, and there may be shallow breathing, and bluish or gray skin color or drooling. So, if you ever see that, you know, someone might be having a seizure. During my first seizure ever, most of that happened besides the pee and the bowel movement happened, and the police thought I was actually overdosing on drugs, and they just handled it very poorly. I'll put a link to my whole story right here or below, so check it out if you haven't already. Awareness is regained slowly, and the person often experiences a postictal period of fatigue, confusion, a severe headache after the seizure. I can tell you right now, like, that's the worst part, like the headache and the migraine after. That lasts for like 48 hours after. It's the worst, to be honest. And then one thing it does kind of talk about right here is sudden unexplained death in epilepsy, or SUDEP. The cause of SUDEP is where death occurs suddenly for no reason and it's unknown. This is rare. Real quick, I actually have a whole book on that as well.